What's up, you creepy chuds, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very honest, unrated, unfiltered conversations about something from the world of horror. Now, on this episode, it's sort of, you might have noticed something actually, because this episode, obviously, when it drops, it will still be February. And the episode that we did before this will also have been in February. The February, we all know, is what? The Valentine's month. It is the month of love, which is weird to talk about on a horror channel. But when we talk about love, last episode was all about Cloverfield, and of course that was all about a murderous, rampaging monster. I mean, obviously that's not anything to do with love, but the underlying sort of background story arc of that was about a man trying to find his lady in the midst of all this destruction, and then they die, at least together. In this movie, we're talking about, well, this movie, obviously the episode we're talking about, Ready or Not. And once again, it's a movie essentially, yes, about a satanic cult family who are doing some nasty things, all in the aid of trying to help themselves not die and not explode. But we obviously get into that. But the underlying aspect of this is also love. So did I plan that February was going to be movies that did have an underlying aspect of love? Absolutely fucking not. Am I taking the credit that it's happened? Yes. So if people out there think that I did this on purpose, good, because I did. But I didn't, but I did. With that out the way, of course, this episode will drop on Valentine's or just after Valentine's Day. So hopefully everybody out there that is in love is having a bloody lovely time. If you're not, I don't know. I feel really bad about saying that now. If just everybody just, be in love and go and watch Ready or Not, because we did, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And as you can see, if you're watching it, and if you're not watching it, you'll be listening to this. And my guest today, I've got Becky. Becky is from the Girl and the Gay podcast. As well as that, you can find her on, this is where I get this wrong, you can find her on Instagram at this.girl.loves.horror. It's probably wrong. Was that right?
No, that was right. Perfect. Yeah.
Well, there we go. We did it. Becky, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. As you know, I listen all the time. So
Absolutely. It's nice to have somebody that does a podcast, and obviously you are going to promote absolutely everything, so everybody make sure that you stick around, because as I said, Becky and her fantastic co-host Jay, who you will know from a previous episode that we've done on the show as well, so they both do the Girl and the Gay podcast. So you can find out everything at the end of the episode, where Becky's going to promote absolutely everything about that. But it's nice having somebody that does a podcast on the show, but also it's weird as well sometimes having them people that listen to the show on the show. Yeah. Because as you know, and because of my anxiety attacks that I've had a million times since before even starting this episode, that I think that everything that I do is shit. So it's nice knowing that someone out there might not think it's that shit. So thank you for listening, and thanks for coming on the show.
No, you do a great job. Do a great job.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll take that all day. So as I said, we're going to be having a good old chat about Ready or Not. This film is actually a new film compared to obviously a lot of movies that I talk about on the show. It was released in 2019. It's directed by, now, they are commonly known as Radio Silence. That is it's a very interesting dynamic about the directing, quadruple. No, I don't know what they are. 3, 4 people. I can't remember. I don't even fucking know now. But basically, Radio Silence is comprised of basically like a director and writers as well. And they all work together on a singular movie, which I find very interesting, because you would think that they would constantly be stepping on each other's toes, but yet somehow it really works.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I can't think actually. What other film did they do? Abigail as well. They've done.
They did Abigail,
yeah.
But then also between that, they did some really shit Scream movies, which people are going to get really pissed off that I've said about that. But do I care? No, they were shit. If you're going to turn Billy Loomis into a ghost, you're not going to have my vote whatsoever. And also, if you're going to have a movie where no one dies but gets stabbed 84 times,
oh yeah,
you're not going to get my vote. but what's interesting about Ready or Not is, as I said, it's directed by Radio Silence, which comprises of, so it's directed by, once again, it's names that I'm always going to get wrong. So you've got Matt Bettinelli Olpin. I mean, that's hard enough anyway. Tyler Gillett, and it's written by Guy Busick and R. Christopher Murphy. So all together, they sort of comprise to create this sort of Transformer Voltron thing of Radio Silence, who made the movie, and then obviously went on to make some shit Scream movies. It is starring the absolutely fantastic and gorgeous Samara Weaving. Yeah. Adam Brody, you know, some teenage sweetheart out there will, you know, this is I can't remember what he was in, but he was in one of those sort of teen programs, I think. Was it the OC?
I can't fucking remember. It was one that I didn't watch, but I knew of him, but I didn't watch the program. And he's just been in that one with Kristen Bell as the sexy
Oh, is he in a new one?
No.
Oh, he's just sexing it up all the time.
Series with Kristen Bell.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't even know who she is, to be honest. I don't know who anyone is. And then we've also got Andy McDowell in this, Mark O'Brien and Henry Zerny, which is obviously completely wrong, but that's the father of it all. But yeah, so it's got, obviously there's loads more people. In fact, this movie has got quite a big cast. And we go into the performances once we start talking about the movie and so on, because there is a lot of really interesting things to talk about with this movie, which is why when you sent your list over, this was the one that I definitely wanted to talk about, because I think this movie is definitely loved by a lot of the horror fans out there, but I don't know if it's necessarily loved as much as it should be universally, and that's what I'm looking forward to talking about.
Yeah, I do.
On IMDb, it's on a 6.8 out of 10 and 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, you know, it's still high. Once again, anything 6 or more on IMDb, you might as well consider yourself the godfather. Okay. Pretty much, anyway. Google synopsis-wise, after the wedding ceremony of a young woman, her new in-laws force her to participate in a seemingly innocent game. Things soon turn bloody and sinister, revealing the sick rituals of the family. That is essentially movie. I mean, that's pretty good from Google, so we might as well just end the episode there, and that's it.
That's what happens.
Yeah, that's what happens. Good night. But that is essentially what happens. We do have Samara Weaving. She's just married into a family of what we come to find out of absolute mad people, Satanist cults, which obviously is revealed more and more throughout the film of how crazy they are about this situation that they think they're in. Yeah. And the situation that they think that they're in is that they have to play, choose, basically a game gets chosen for them to play, and sometimes those games seem to be sort of harmless games, but unfortunately if you get hide and seek, which is what Samara Weaving's character in the movie gets, then basically that becomes essentially about having her as or that person as a sacrifice, so the family can then survive and then don't meet their demise by blowing up, which obviously I'm sure we'll talk about as well. Is that what happens? Did I just get that completely wrong?
No, that's pretty much it, isn't it? It's like any new addition to the family. So I mean, it's not children or anything from what I gather, but it's like anybody marrying into the family. It seems they seem to have to go through this ritual. And yeah, like you say, some of them, I mean, I didn't know the games that they'd said the other people had before. But yeah. Basically, she picks the bad card.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she picks the bad card, and then she obviously doesn't believe, like any normal person, she believes that it's not actually a real thing. Yeah. You know, as you do. You don't think that this family are going to be out to murder you to save themselves. But that's what the movie is. Yeah. And what a super crazy fun movie it is. We're getting to talking about it. Obviously, normally I always ask, when did my guests, when did they first see this movie? It is a newer movie, so it's sort of not as relevant. But I will ask you, when did you see this movie at the cinema? Was this something you saw on streaming or on physical home media release?
No, I think I saw it when it came out streaming, and I think when I watched it when it first came out, it really was like nobody had really
Yeah.
seen it in the world of horror. It's definitely this kind of last year or so, I think, where it's getting that bit more better known. More people are watching it. I think whether that's because they've seen Samara Weaving and other stuff and then find this, I'm not sure. But yeah, I know when I first watched it, nobody else seemed to know about it, but I've always loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think I'm the same with you. That I'm pretty sure it was Netflix. I'm sure it was Netflix who had it first. I could be wrong, but I'm the same. I saw it on one of the streaming services first as well, because I don't think that we got it down our way at the cinema. And yeah, when I first watched it, I instantly fell in love with it. And obviously, we'll talk about like all why we've fallen in love with this movie and so on. But yeah, it's an interesting one because, like you said, it's now sort of coming to the point where more and more people are picking up on it, and it would be interesting to find out from people as to why that is. So whether you're watching this, whether you're listening to it, you can always DM me or send me a message or comment or whatever. Let me know, like, when did you watch this movie? Let me know, because it'd be interesting to see if this is because of, the star that Samara Weaving has sort of like really done or created herself in this world of sort of horror now. Like, she is what people sort of consider as a scream queen, so to speak. And I mean, we're talking about screams. I mean, she has literally one of the greatest screams out there,
Yeah,
not just in this movie, but just in general in all of the movies she's done. I'm pretty much in love with Samara Weaving.
yes, yeah. I think
I think before she did this movie, I watched The Babysitter, which is another movie that doesn't get the recognition it deserves, and I can sort of see it not being that much because it is more of a horror comedy. But The Babysitter is one of those movies that I am absolutely in love with,
yeah,
and she in that, not only is her performance fantastic, but also she's absolutely gorgeous. So it was nice seeing her in this as well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know whether it's the rising star of what Samara Weaving is the reason this is happening, or whether it's because radio silence has, like you said, with Abigail and the Screw movies,
yeah,
or just people haven't been fucking watching it, and that's why nobody gives a shit about it.
yeah, yeah.
So let's start getting into talking about the movie itself. So this is what I would consider obviously a horror comedy. That's dropping F-bombs left, right, and centre, and that's mostly due to Samara Weaving. But this film is very, very funny, but sometimes I don't know whether that's because I find things that are very dark very funny. Do you find this film funny, or is it
Yeah,
just because
no,
I'm messed up?
yes, yeah, just but not like a constant humour. There'll just be moments, won't there, where, like you say, you're probably kind of not meant to laugh at it, but it's funny.
Yeah, like she punches a kid.
Yeah, oh, that's hilarious. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, you're like, I shouldn't laugh at that, but
yeah.
also she has just punched a kid's lights
That's
out, and
shocking,
it's
isn't it?
hilarious.
Like, whoa, she just did that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of moments like in the movie like that, like you're saying, where it's sporadic, like it's not like just a constant like joke after joke after joke. But it's like it is very, very funny, but laugh out loud in moments where it's like moments where you're supposed to laugh with it, and then there's moments that you shouldn't laugh with it, but you are. And I think as well that one of the things that sort of does make you laugh is where you're sort of laughing on the inside, but at the same time, you're like the character of Samara Weaving. Once again, everybody knows I never remember the names of the characters in it. I don't know if you can remember Samara Weaving's
Grace.
name. There we go. See, someone's got to. It's not going to be me. But she goes through so much shit in this movie that almost is comical on itself. That it's almost feels a bit like Looney Tunes, where it's the amount of like stuff that if it's not, she goes from this moment to this moment, and something is happening to her constantly all the way until obviously she gets into the absolute mess that she is by the end of the movie. Still looks fantastic, but so much has happened to her throughout the movie that you feel really sorry for her, but at the same time, you can't help but laugh about everything that she has been through.
Yeah, all the situations that arise, it's just like, and like you say, even sometimes it's just like, oh god, I can't believe that's happening, and kind of laughing at it. But yeah, and it just gradually gets worse throughout the whole film.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, talking already, we're talking about Samara Weaving, which I wasn't. My plan wasn't to spend my whole time talking about Samara Weaving, but I do genuinely think that she's fantastic, and there's a lot of reasons as to why I think she's great. But in general, this movie, everyone in this movie is fantastic, and I think one of the reasons that I really like about this, and I speak about this quite a lot on the show, is that now a lot of movies, a lot of the time, very regularly, that all the characters sort of blend into one. And this is another point that I'll make in a minute as well, so I won't really go into it as well. But this movie really stands out where it's very, very reminiscent of a time before, which, as I said, I'll mention in a minute because I want to talk about that. But everyone feels like their individual person, their individual character in this movie. And I absolutely love that because it adds extra dimension to it and different dimension to the movie where you're interested in seeing each person's sort of journey, or you're actually quite interested in knowing a little bit about where those characters came from before.
Yeah.
And that goes down to like where it's very clever writing. Whereas, like I said, in a lot of movies now, all the characters feel like they're just like an amalgamation of just one person. And then that becomes about like what's happening in the movie rather than about the characters getting to those points.
Yeah.
Whereas in this movie, everybody sort of is playing their part, performance wise, but also character wise. It's very, very well written, this movie, which is absolutely incredible. But the performances, are just absolutely top notch. Now, I did mention Adam Brody. I think that's his name.
Yeah.
But Adam Brody, I did mention him before. Now, he, to me, I will talk about Samara Weaving in a minute, obviously. But Adam Brody, I don't know if you think the same thing as me, but I thought he was really good in this movie.
Yeah. I think everybody plays their part brilliantly. Like, even because there's quite a few unknown people, or well, they're unknown to me. I don't know. I've never seen them before. Don't recognise their names, but they all did brilliantly in their parts. But yeah, he was fantastic. Because you like,
yeah,
you don't like him, and then you do like him, and then you don't know what side he's on, and like he does it really well.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. I think that's what's really good about it is that he plays the part really well because it's sort of, I mean, this is a big part of the movie that I'll go into as well. I keep on saying I'll go into things because there's so much I've got to talk about. But what I always like to try and, like focus on one thing at a time with this because otherwise my brain will explode very much like everybody at the end of this movie. But Adam Brody, I think, is really good in this movie because, like you said, he is he does a very good job at playing somebody that's very sort of conflicted about what's right and what's wrong. And he plays that really well. And what's great is that once again, it comes to the credit of the writing and the making of this movie because he could have just been some guy just standing there and the same as everybody else whose job is just to try and find Samara Weaving to kill her. But we've got so many different characters in this movie. We've got his wife in the movie who they quite clearly don't want to be with each other. But yet he just can't, it feels like he can't be bothered to leave her and she won't leave him because she wants the money.
Yeah.
Then you've got like some friends of the family or the other daughter and stuff. And then you've got the one that's doing the drugs all the time. Then you've got the crazy, I think she's like the aunt, but she's like crazy creepy. She's got like the spiky up hair. She looks a bit like a skunk.
Yeah, she's, she has some moments in the film that are hilarious, but yeah, she is so creepy.
Yeah, and there's what I love about her character, and I don't know obviously if it was like purposeful, but there was something like really like almost old school vampire about her, where it almost felt like she would do these sort of hand movements, sort of thing, you know, like vampires
Yeah,
used to do and stuff. I think like the way that they obviously casted her, but the way that she performed that was really fun, really clever. The dad in it is hilarious because he's just like, as the movie goes on, like at the start of it, he's very like formal, you know, and very dad-like. And throughout the movie, he just becomes an absolute wreck because he's like, shit, like I don't want to die. But then, funnily enough, it's like it's his wife that is the almost his wife. Almost the more the movie goes on, the more that she's calm about it, and almost he's like she accepts everything that's going to happen.
yeah,
So, like I said, like it's incredible right in this movie, not just you know right in the characters, but all the movie is really performed really well by a lot of cast. And like I said, there's a lot of cast in this, but there isn't like normally if you have a cast this size, things get really overpopulated, and then you are like, oh, they don't need this character, they don't need this character. But I don't know if you're like me, but I don't. I feel like I wouldn't take anybody out of this because each person adds something to the movie. Like even the kids, they're not in it much, but they don't do anything where you're like, I'll get this annoying little fuck out of it.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, they actually, I mean, they serve a purpose. One of them has to get punched in the face. Then they obviously, you know, then they have the impact of like, oh shit, they've gone there and blown kids up.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, so I think I would. Is there anybody that you would take out of this, or would you just go, no, it's fine?
No, I think it's perfect. I think, like I say, they all play a part that's needed and very much helps the movie along. Yeah, no, I wouldn't take it. Well, there'd be no need to take anybody out in my eyes.
Yeah, good. Good. I'm not the only one. Good.
Yeah,
But so, what I did mention a little bit as well is that I mentioned that there was a time when we had characters like this, and this whole movie actually reminds me of a time. And once again, you could completely disagree, but this film feels like really 90s to me, and I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it is the characters or the fact that, as I said, they're trying to create multiple different characters and put them all together. I don't know whether it is the writing. I don't think it's the look of the movie, which I obviously will get into. But there is something very 90s about this, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if you feel that way or if you can pinpoint it for me because my brain won't let me do it.
I mean, I hadn't really thought about that, but that could be why I like it. You know, that's when I grew up.
Maybe.
My favourite horror era was the 90s and slashers back then, so could be why I love it so much.
Possibly, yeah. And that's an interesting point as well because obviously, yeah, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s and so on like that, like, you know, in the 90s we had a lot of that, and obviously the 80s and so on. So it is one of those movies that feels very reminiscent of a time past in horror, and that might be one of the reasons why you know I sort of enjoy it that extra level. But also what was very interesting about this is that when I watched this movie, and this is before I heard anything about them making Scream, when I watched this movie, for some reason I kept on thinking that they would make a really good Scream movie, because I think it was because the way that they were, because of the characters, because we all know in Scream movies, they try and have as many characters as they can, because obviously really they're trying to throw you off of who's going to be the killer, even though it's always the person wearing a flannel shirt. So that's it. So that when the next one comes out, just look for the person wearing a checked flannel shirt. You'll know who it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's easy as that. Just look back all the others, you'll pretty much get there. But yeah, so I think so. When I saw this, I was just like, I think because of all of that, they would really do a really good job with a Scream movie. And then how fucking wrong was I? Because they did get to go and make Scream movies, and they did a shit job. So, and I know I'm going to get loads of flack for that, and I don't even care. As I said, they just didn't work for me. Which is a shame. And then obviously now we're going to get another one, which looks like it's going to be a movie that's trying to win back the fans by having everything happen in it and having everybody return. I mean, they probably have Dewey return somehow. I don't fucking know, but they probably will.
They shouldn't have killed him off, so I'd be quite happy with that. But
yeah, well, that's where I lost all faith in everything.
Yeah,
as soon as that happened, I was just like, I'm leaving the cinema. Bye. But yeah, so I don't know what it is. It's something very 90s about this movie. but I think that it just goes down to the fact that it's like it feels very reminiscent through the writing of this movie. Is I think that's probably what makes me feel it's very reminiscent of the characters of what a past of cinema used to be, not just in horror but in general. We used to have characters that were actual characters, and then they were performed really well by different types of actors, and then now, as I said, it all feels very like, well, this person feels the same as this person, and then you're like, well, that sort of doesn't make it as exciting, and that's a shame, because you want to know more about these characters in Ready or Not, whether they're good or bad. But obviously Samara Weaving, to go into it really quickly, just everything about her in this movie, and pretty much any time she does, no matter whether she's in a movie that's like serious horror, whether it's comedy horror, she's just absolutely, truly like so much fun to watch, because she's so good at everything. Like, there are moments in this movie where she has to be serious and she's absolutely terrified and she's screaming, and she does that so well, and you have that full believability in what she's doing. But then her comedic timing, or the way that she says stuff, is so funny in this. And every time she's in something, like, she's absolutely one of the best out there as far as I'm concerned. Not just in horror, but everything she does.
And she like goes through all the emotions in this, doesn't she? Because I mean, I love it at the start where she's kind of got it, first finding out like we have to play a game, and she's got this like the naive, when she picks the card and she's like giggling, like, are we actually going to play hide and seek? Like, and just this cuteness about her. And then obviously up until the very end where she's just like a kick-ass final girl, like you say, effing and blinding constantly, like not taking any of the shit. And the scream is just, you feel the pain when she screams. It's like this throaty, I don't know, I couldn't even replicate it or attempt to. It's just amazing.
No. She is. She just does something, like, it's just, her scream on its own is like an act, like a performance. Like, every time, like, it's always different, and she manages to like make you feel the exact thing that person is feeling, like, through a scream. And I don't know, I just think she's so good. And I love it when we, luckily in horror, it's like when you get a director that's fantastic, but they are exclusively to horror, like people like Ty West and so on, who predominantly is a horror director, and you're like, we need to keep hold of them. And like Samara Weaving is one of those people that obviously she's popped up in other horrors and so on. And I hope that is something that she enjoys, and then she will continue. Of course, I want her to have success outside of it, but I hope that she sort of continues, because she really captures the essence of the characters, that whoever she is, whether she's playing a character, as I said, like in a serious movie, and she really does a really good job at doing the serious stuff. But if it's one where she's got to have the great comedic timing that she does that really well. So I promise I'll try not talk any more about her, which I will. But ultimately, I probably will. But ultimately, I think that this movie, performance-wise, is absolutely fantastic. Everybody knocks it out the park, and I genuinely think it's one of those movies that, like, for me, I would put this on to show a lot of modern-day horror filmmakers and say, look, just study the characters in this and study the writing, and then you'll figure out how that works with your movie, rather than making everybody the same and no one gives a shit about these characters. Because this happens. I mean, I've already mentioned Cloverfield in this, but with Cloverfield, for example, I don't know if you've seen it or like it, but with Cloverfield, you're absolutely fine being on the journey with these characters, because you're interested in them, you're interested in their story, and you're interested to see where that story takes you from start, middle to end in the movie. And that's how I feel about Ready or Not. They're all so interesting, and you're happy to figure out where you're going to go with this. And you don't know whether it's going to end good, you don't know whether it's going to end bad, and that's another thing I'll talk about as well. And
you love them,
but now a lot of but a lot of modern day movies now, they just don't feel like they have those moments where or where you go from start, you meet these characters, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm interested in seeing the journey that we're on with them. obviously I'm not saying all the time, but I'm saying a lot of modern horrors, that's how I feel when I watch them. And I'm like, okay, well, these characters are just, this is it. And then we're going to be focused on more of the idea of the story rather than seeing the journey through the characters' eyes and so on. So, so brilliant performances in this, fantastic writing. Visually, I don't know what you think about this movie, but I think visually it looks pretty nice. It's quite a nice looking movie. I think the lighting's really good. I don't necessarily think I like the colouring of the movie is like a weird, like, I don't know, it feels like they pressed the wrong button and they sort of like the colouring,
turn the contrast
it's like
down or something.
something like that. Like, it's very like, because basically what happens is a lot of the time is if you have quite a low budget movie, color grading is something that's so important to giving like a bigger look to the movie. And I think basically with this movie, I feel like they did that because if you notice in this movie as well, one of the things that you can help to create like a cinematic look on a low budget is to have like lights in the background and stuff, because it helps add like the extra depth and so on. They do that a lot in this movie where every shot there's loads of lights, although I think on this movie they had like only a certain amount of lights that they kept on having to move around every single second. Like every shot they had to keep moving the same lights into the shot. But yeah, so I think that it would have been more suited if they had like, say, more of a natural colour like palette, so to speak, you know, like more so at the end where she was outside, that was more natural looking. I wish that it had that. But visually, there's a lot of really nice shots on it. They do a really good job at creating a lot of tension throughout the way that the movie is filmed, like not just through performance and so on or how it's written and so on. I think they do a really good job at filming stuff to create, you know, heightened tension, like close-ups and stuff if they need to, of Samara Weaving's face, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, we won't complain.
So... yeah, absolutely. So visually, I think it looks really nice. But one thing that I really love is that I love that the fact that this feels like a really like unique and original idea. Obviously, in a genre that's been sort of done everything before, it's difficult to feel like you're watching something that feels sort of new. And there obviously are things that, you know, are quite reminiscent of other things in this movie, but I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think this feels like when I watched this, and I think that was one of the reasons why I watched it and loved it straight away, it feels quite a unique movie.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when I first watched it, I did think like, wow, I've not really seen anything like this before. But I think since then, you have had these kind of films like The Hunt and stuff where they're quite a similar story of basically people getting hunted, really, because that's kind of what's happening, isn't it? Since this film, I've seen more like it, but when it came out, I felt like it was quite an original concept idea.
Yeah, and I really like that. I like the fact that it feels quite original. It's quite unique. And one of the things that I always say on the show is that one of the most important things that you can do with horror is make something that's unpredictable. And that is so difficult because, like I said, we've seen it all before. And the fact that this feels original, unique is fantastic. But it feels very unpredictable. Like, you don't know who is going to be the next person that's going to die. You don't know if that potentially might be Samara Weaving at the end. You don't know... You don't really know quite literally what's going to be round the next corner in this movie. And I think they do that really, really well. I don't know if you think the same way.
Yeah, and even like at the very end moment, you know, when the curtains are pulled and it's dawn, and you get that moment of, oh, nobody's going to die. Like, it's all bullshit. But then, obviously, after a few moments, that changes. But, you know, you just never know which way it's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't know, there's a lot of like, you know, turns with characters in this. Obviously, you know, we already spoken about Adam Brody, and Adam Brody is almost like the reluctant to do this. But then there's that moment, I think, where after, you know, when you see the kid that's been punched in the face by Samara Weaving, and then there's that sort of switch with him where the mother of the kid basically turns around and says like, I don't want anything to happen to my kids, you know what I mean? And I feel like with him, that's like the switch where he's quite selfish throughout the movie in a way where he's like, oh, I don't want to do this and I don't really care about my family and so on. But then in that moment, it sort of switches where he's like, oh shit, like, if it is real and something happens, then yeah, like these kids are going to die, and like you know, they're his nephews or whatever they are, you know, and I think that switches, and I think that's really interesting. Or the husband in it, how he spends the whole movie, you know, trying to save her, but then when she's, you know, obviously going absolutely crazy and actually killing his family, then that's when he's like, oh, okay, like maybe I'm not doing the right thing for himself and save it. You know, he's not saving his family, trying to save her. And then that switches, and then he becomes a completely different character. So you're constantly on your toes in this. And then on top of all of that, you have no idea what's around the corner for Samara Weaving's character every single second. So I think it's a very, very well made movie in regards to, once again, doing something that's very, very difficult in horror, which is keeping it unpredictable. And I really, really like that. And like you mentioned as well, the ending, I absolutely love the ending in this movie. Obviously, if you're watching or listening to this, I'm assuming you've seen Ready or Not. But I always say, if you haven't, well, there's always going to be spoilers in this because we're having a conversation about the entirety of the movie. So if you haven't seen Ready or Not, then that's on you. Basically, at the end of the movie, they've played. They run out of time, as you said. The skunk haired lady, I can't remember her name, but she opens the window, and then time's up. And then they're standing there, and nothing happens. And straight away, obviously, you think as the viewer, you're like, oh, well, they're just all crazy people, and you know, they're basically killing all these people, and all these people died for no reason because they believe they're just a crazy satanic cult. And which is also a rather interesting moment in the movie, because I spent the whole movie, I didn't necessarily think that it was all like Satanists. I just thought that they were like just a crazy cult. But then they start shouting like "Hail Satan" and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, okay, that's where it's all coming from. But then you're waiting, and then you're like, oh, okay, so it's all fucked, and they didn't need to do this. But then one by one, they start exploding, and I mean, when I first saw this, I literally laughed my absolute arse off seeing these people and the violence, or the way that, you know, how violent it is when they're exploding is so funny. That it's so well done. I don't know. Do you like that? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it just looks perfect, and like there's just so much blood, and then you've got like body parts like dripping off the ceiling, and she's obviously covered because it all splats in her face, doesn't it? And yeah, it's just brilliant. And it's just like one by one. I think the only one you don't really see is the sister and the kids who run out the door, don't they, thinking they can get away, and then you just hear this pop, 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 all three times.
That's it. And I think they were like, that's how we get away with it, by not showing the kids blow up. But the intention is obviously like, you know, that's happened. But I think that makes it, like, as horrible as it sounds, but funnier, because it's the way that it just, they leave and they blow up, but it goes all through the door everywhere. And I think once again, it's like, they could have done this in so many different ways, and yet the way they did it has the most impact on you as a viewer, because it's so instant. Like, the pop is so instant, they blow up, but it's everywhere. It's so, as I said, it's so violent and visceral, and it's such an interesting way of doing it, but it's the best way of doing it. And you almost, like, not only is it funny, but it's also quite tragic, but also you sort of like sit there going, oh, I can't believe I've just seen that.
Yeah.
And that's, once again, it's really, really good, because obviously we see so much in horror. And then obviously we get to the end bit where Samara Weaving, you know, they're all dead and she gets to survive, and she's sitting on the steps at the end, you know, with absolutely blood all over her, which once was a very nice wedding dress. Now it's absolutely destroyed. and she's got. Although I don't know how she managed to get her cigarettes, I still haven't figured that out.
It's
Maybe she picked them
the
up on the way
mum's,
out.
wasn't it? Yeah, she passed the mum's body. Because I think at the very beginning they talk about the cigarette case when she's getting married, and the mum says, "Oh, do you smoke?" And she's like, "Oh no!" Like, even though we saw her smoking earlier.
We've seen her, yeah.
Yeah, I think she walks past the mum's body and picks it up on the way out.
Oh, there we go. Well, you solved that one for me because obviously I'm too dumb to figure that out. But she has it, and yeah, she's absolutely a badass. And then it ends really cool. Like I like how when movies like this end like that, where it's sort of you don't know, because in my brain, obviously, like afterwards, you're like, how does she get away with this, right? Because
what does she tell the police?
yeah, like she's got blood all over her. And all the family are dead, and obviously they're quite a well-off family. So you could start be thinking like, well, the police might be thinking, well, she's killed them all off to get money and so on. Now she's married into it. You know what I mean? So there's loads of things that you start thinking about afterwards. But then at the same time, you're like, I like the way that it ends. I like that it doesn't give you any more sort of explanation, because it just ends on her saying in-laws or whatever it was or something. And I just think that's like a really cool way to end on.
Yeah.
And I really like that. But as we know, they have officially announced that they're doing a Ready or Not 2. I don't know how I feel about that, because I like, sometimes movies are good where they're just, the way this movie ended for me is perfect. And sometimes I don't necessarily really like it when they take a full-on supernatural route. Because this film is quite, obviously completely grounded, apart from like the crazy shit that's going on, it's quite grounded in reality. And then when you get that moment at the end where you're like, oh no, it's not real, then you're like, oh okay, like that's the way they're going to end it. But then when it goes like essentially real supernatural, like the fact that it is real with this sort of thing, and then they all blow up,
ghosts.
Sometimes I don't like it because it takes you too far out of it. But with this movie, as a rare exception, I'm like, that makes this movie so much better. So then you're like, where do they go in Ready or Not 2? I don't know what you like about it, whether you think...
Well, I think it's perfect as a standalone film and doesn't need anything. I just don't know where they'll take this, because Samara Weaving's in it as well. I hope the sequel doesn't ruin the love for the first one. But I'll be watching it. I'll be seeing what they do. In my head, when I try and think, well, what would you do next? Like, where would you go? Where are they going to take it? Like, what are the possibilities? I just can't think of anything. But so it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I just hope it's good.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, and what's really interesting is, and I feel like you're probably the same as me in this regard, is that you actually get quite like, not, I don't know, sad is sad the word? I don't know. Like when you think about it, you sort of overthink it, because because this movie is so good, and I hold it, and I know that you hold it in such sort of high regards, which obviously we'll talk about as well. But we hold this film so highly regarded in a genre that's obviously full of absolute shit. A lot of the stuff we watch, out of so many movies that this genre churns out, very few are there that are this good, that stick in your mind, and then you're happy to watch every single time, like Ready or Not. So it is actually quite a rarity that you get a movie like this that you're like, I think I hold it this highly regarded. So when you hear, oh, there's a sequel, you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I want that, because then you start to think, like you said, like you don't want it to suck. You don't want it to be shit. And then if it is, then it leaves that sort of bit of tarnish on the original, because you're like, now I can still watch the first one, enjoy it. But I don't know if you're like me, but if I watch one, I feel like I have to watch the others, which sucks if it's Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, because then I've got to fucking watch them all, even the shit ones. But I just feel like if I watch one, I've got to watch the other one, and I feel like if Ready or Not 2 isn't any good, then I'm like, oh, that's going to suck, because I feel like I might not even have to watch Ready or Not anymore, because I know that her journey continues, but it was shit. But hopefully it'd be really good, because I don't know, because obviously they've already shown that there is a supernatural element to it all anyway. So if they go back to like realistic and be like almost forget about that happened, then
Yeah.
you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. So
No.
I don't know.
And, like,
We'll see.
she wouldn't play the game again, would she? Or surely she wouldn't put anyone else through that playing the game. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll just see where they take it, I suppose.
We'll see. Yeah, I suppose the it's always, obviously you've always got to try and look at the optimistic side of it, and I think for me it's like, although like I said, the negative side of it is I know they went on to make some shit Scream movies, but the good thing is that I know that this movie is, and I haven't seen Abigail, I really want to, but I've heard that that's quite good. But I know that this movie is very well written. I know that they can write characters really well. I know that they can cast the right people. I know that they can create things that are unpredictable, because they've shown that they are quite clearly really, really good talents in this movie, and creating this movie. They've done such a fantastic job that I feel like I can sort of be behind them to do another one.
Yeah.
It's just, it's difficult, because you're like, I don't want them to make another one, but if they are going to make another one, I sort of am with them, because it'd be interesting to see what they do with it, because this movie is obviously, an unpredictable and very interesting movie.
Yeah.
That's such a joy to watch, that you hope they sort of create that magic with another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll
We'll
be
see.
watching it and supporting it either way. So
yeah, that's it. That's the problem with us horror people, isn't it? that we put ourselves through punishment, because either way we're gonna watch it, and that's what sucks when it's shit, because it's like, oh, that's a fuck, because we sort of take it to heart, because like I said, and I keep saying this, but the rarity of having a movie that I consider something that could easily become a classic, which I genuinely think Ready or Not could be, and I'll speak a little bit more about that as well. But I think that, like, over time, this is a movie that I hope, and I think it should, like, continue on a trajectory of like more and more people watch it, and it becomes more and more of people's like go-to movie, or one of the movies they're like, do you know what, I'm just going to put on Ready or Not, because I know that I'm going to have a good time. I think that's what this movie is. So yeah, I don't know. It would be a shame. It would be a shame if they ruin that. Hopefully they don't. I really fucking hope they don't. But yeah, absolutely. Other things. I mean, the other thing I've got down here is the new husband is a piece of shit. That's obvious. He is a piece of shit. Also, he's not good looking enough to get someone like Samara Weaving. That's all I'm saying about that. So that's all that is.
Adam Brody. He was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, me too. I'll go with that. And so there's so much going for this movie that is absolutely fantastic. I think. Have you got anything? We're going to get into our overall thoughts a little bit later, anyway. But is there anything that you think about the movie itself that's like a little bit different, or anything else?
No, I mean, it's just all the great scenes, like, I suppose we didn't really mention the three kind of helpers, waitresses, nannies, whatever they were. I think they were the help that were basically used for a bit of everything, weren't they? And like the comedic but awful ways that they end up accidentally dying, like just things like that. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you're right. I mean, that's what's so great about this movie. Like, this is one of those movies that when you talk about it, you think about it, and then in your head, you're sort of like internally sort of laughing at those moments, because it is a very, very clever blend of sort of multiple different sort of things. Like, it has the comedy, but it has the action, it has the horror, and it has, those moments where, she puts her hand on the nail and you're like, oh, that sucks. Or where she's trying to get out of the like the railings, the gate sort of thing, and she's got that thing going into her back. Yeah. So it's got those horror moments where you're like, that sucks. I hope that never happens to me, which is always good in horror if that happens. Because you're watching something that you're like grossed out by. So she goes through the shit, and you have all those moments. But then, like I said, you have all the comedy moments where a lot of people meet their demise and have their deaths in very funny ways in this movie. and it makes it even more fun, more exciting. And I think that's what this movie is. I think it's a very exciting movie, like from start to finish. You're interested in the characters, you're interested in the story, you're interested to go, right, okay, well, they're saying this is going to happen. Is it actually going to happen? And you've got to wait until the very end to find out if it will. Yeah. And obviously that's very well done. This film has a lot going for it, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to our overall thoughts. On the show, obviously, I always do some production info and facts. So some of you may know this already, but the I can't even speak now. The Lidomus, I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it, but the home in Ready or Not, the home itself, the big sort of mansion sort of thing, you may have recognised it in another movie before, but it's not a horror movie. It's a comedy. In fact, it's one of the stupidest comedies ever made, and I absolutely love it. But anybody out there, if you know the movie Billy Madison, this actual mansion was Billy Madison's mansion, his house that he stayed in. And I knew that from the pool. You get the shots where you've got the pool, and obviously it's the same pool as like Billy Madison and stuff. So there's a little thing for anybody out there that likes Adam Sandler. That's the link. That's the link that it has to Ready or Not.
Oh.
Samara Weaving, she accidentally hit co-star Andy McDowell with a prop brick. So during their sort of fight scene that they had, she accidentally hit her with a prop thing, and McDowell basically sort of Samara Weaving, as far as I know, I think she thought that after that she was just going to get fired because she's just like hit Andy McDowell. But basically, apparently she was an absolute trooper and was just like, give me a minute and then we get back to it. But unfortunately, she didn't have a very good day because she also hurt her back before shooting as well. So she went through it.
Oh no.
That sucks. The original ending was actually a lot darker and would have seen Grace actually getting killed. So the original plan for the movie was that Grace would have actually died at the end of it, which one meant we wouldn't have got Ready or Not 2, or we might have, but in a different formula or different format, or different characters and so on. It would have been a different character we're following. But I like the ending that we got because I just think it's such a great ending, because then we wouldn't have got these insane exploding bodies that is so fun to watch. Not that it should be fun, but it is so fun to watch. So I think that they chose the better ending for sure. I don't know if you would have preferred it. I don't know who would prefer her to die.
A more serious film, wouldn't it? It should have died at the end, whereas the ending we got was much more fun and in tone with the rest of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing I've got is that Samara Weaving, Adam Brody, and Henry Czerny, which is obviously completely pronounced wrong, but I can't fucking say how it's spelled. They actually have all appeared in the Scream franchise. Weaving and Czerny, which, as I said, to clarify, that's the dad in it. They both appeared in Scream 6, as we know. Unfortunately, Samara Weaving met a demise at the start in the most obvious death of what was going to be, because as soon as you put Samara Weaving at the start, you're like, oh, they're going to Drew Barrymore her. And I remember watching that and I was just like, why did they have to do this to the best person in the movie? But also Adam Brody himself, he was in Scream 4 from 2011. So yeah, they've been in Scream movies.
Yeah, I don't remember him in that. Was it a bit?
No, I think he was probably like Emma Roberts' boyfriend or something like that. I don't fucking know.
One of his friends.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. I mean, once again, she wore a flannel, so everybody should have figured out that she was going to be the one that does it. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Scream 4. But once again, that's on them. So there we go. There's some production info, some facts. Also, as well, when just going a little bit back to before we go into overall thoughts, one thing I did want to mention is that not just Samara Weaving's performance, but also the amount of shit that she must have had to go through to make this movie. Like, once again, that's absolute, like, more kudos to her, because I mean, there's moments when she's falling into like things with bodies in it and it's gross, and then she's like, just by the end of this movie, like she must have gone through it reminds me of like, you know, like the Evil Dead movies where Bruce Campbell and all the cast have to go through the absolute shit.
Yeah.
Or once again, I mean, it seems to just be Sam Raimi movies, but Drag Me to Hell, where the I think it's Alison Lohman, I think it is, who was in Drag Me to Hell, but she had to go through loads of shit making this movie as well.
Yeah.
Samara Weaving, you can tell that this was definitely I'm sure she enjoyed it, but this doesn't seem like a comfortable film for her to make. So, absolute kudos to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, props to her, because there's a lot of stuff that you're like, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, no, I'll even just getting covered in all the stuff that she was covered in, like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone there, like, flicking the blood in her face when the bodies were popping.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and little bits of brain or whatever and stuff like that going in her face, and you're like, oh, what a glamorous life this profession of acting is.
Yeah.
So there we go. So overall thoughts on the movie. I always let my guests go first. So if you've got anything else that you want to say about the movie, and as I said, your overall thoughts, take as long as you want with it. But yeah, what are your overall thoughts on Ready or Not?
I mean, we've probably said a lot of it already, to be honest, but I just think it's like the perfect blend of horror and comedy, because it's not like gory as in gross, but it's very bloody. There's just lots of blood constantly with all the kills and everything, but the humour's perfect, and I think it's just a perfect blend of both. And like we said, performances from absolutely every single person were just flawless. Perfect. I loved every character, also hated them as well. And I think it's just got the rewatchability. Like, I mean, I've definitely seen this over 5 times now, and I could watch it again. I mean, I've watched it 3 times this week, just prepping for this. I can just watch it again and again. It's a really easy watch. I think if you haven't seen it, you definitely should check it out. And yeah, Samara Weaving jumps right after watching this. Was one of my favourite final girls, for sure.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I think that's a really good point, is that this has that rarity of rewatchable value from a modern day horror. You know, this is why we always clamour and want old school horror and stuff, because we always go back to these horrors, because not only did they help create the genre, but they also are so much fun when we go back to the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street, the Alien movies, the Halloween movies, the Hellraiser movies. Then we just go back to these movies, whether they're part of a franchise, whether they're just singular movies on their own. We go back to these movies, so it's very difficult to keep on wanting to go back to a lot of modern horror. And there are some, but there's not many in the grand scheme of, like I said earlier, and the amount of shit and the amount of movies that get made in the horror genre, the small amount that I feel that I want to go back to and watch often, and happy to keep watching, there's not actually that many. You know, films like Deadstream is a movie that I love and always want to keep going back to. Films like The Void. The Void is a modern horror masterpiece that I will champion for the rest of my life to make sure that more people watch The Void. Not many people have, and I will keep doing what I can. But that's, once again, a movie that from 2016 now, that I keep going back to, that I still consider a modern horror. The Guest is another movie that is borderline horror and is horror adjacent. But once again, it's a movie that I find myself going back to. But I can name movies that I keep going back to and happy to go back to, and there's not many. And Ready or Not, for me, like you said, it has that repeat viewing factor of it, where you could watch this like you have 3 times this week, and I watch this to do my prep. But if somebody said to me, oh, do you want to watch Ready or Not? I'll be like, yeah, absolutely, because even though you know everything that happens, you enjoy from start to finish the journey. Yeah. You hope that you might find little bits that you didn't see before, but also you're happy to just be on this journey that's so funny and so unpredictable. Obviously, you know what happens once you've seen it, but you're still happy to see those moments again because they're so well performed, so well written, so well shot. This is a movie that like I mentioned as well, and I said I'll go back to, I genuinely believe that this movie is probably better because when this movie came out, the reviews were actually really good. And that's a good thing. The reviews for it were really good. And people did watch it. And it is a movie that within, obviously, a lot of the horror community, people do like it, especially if they've seen it.
Yeah.
But it isn't necessarily one of those that has been seen, or I don't speak to a lot of people outside of the horror genre or the horror community that people have seen.
Yeah.
And you said something right as well, that this is one of those movies that like you can sit down and put on. And I feel that this is one that almost anyone can enjoy. You don't just have to be a fan of horror to enjoy this movie, because yeah, it does have like the horror moments and stuff, but there's so much fun with this movie and so uniqueness and so much clever stuff with this movie that I feel this is one of those movies that's very universal.
Yeah.
And I want that to be the case more so, because that's one of the reasons obviously I like doing episodes about films like Ready or Not, because people do know about it, people do love it, but there are also a lot of people that have no idea about it, and there are a lot of people who don't necessarily even know, like, you know, that don't really watch horror movies, and there are still movies that they should still watch that are part of the genre. And Ready or Not, for me, is definitely one of those movies where I would be happy. I would be happy to put this on for my mum, you know, and you know, she doesn't watch horror. I mean, she's scared shitless of it. But or I've got a friend of mine who literally cannot watch any horror movies. But I would be happy to put this on for them and feel like I know that they would go, "That's a really good movie."
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when you know that this is a very well made, put together movie. And I feel like there needs to be more of that around this movie. Or I could be talking absolute shit.
No, I'd agree. Yeah, I'd agree. I don't think you need to be a fan of horror to watch it, even if you're somebody who generally doesn't like horror. I think you're going to like this film. Like, just like you say, it's just a fun time. You know, it's not scary.
Yeah, it might make you... Yeah, it might. Yeah, it's not a scary movie. It just might make you wince a little bit. If you don't like nails in your hands, then no, you probably won't like this movie. If you don't like kids getting punched in the face, you probably won't like this movie. If you don't like people getting blown up, you probably won't like this movie. But if you do, or you don't mind it, then you will love this movie. So as I say, when I do these episodes, I assume that anybody that's watching this or listening to it, I'm sure you've seen Ready or Not. If you have, obviously, wherever if you're watching it or listening to it, make sure you comment or send me a message. Let me know what you think about Ready or Not. If you think that it also, like I do, I feel that it needs to be more highly regarded by universally by everyone, or whether you think I'm talking shit and you think this movie is a piece of trash. Hopefully you don't, because I will fight you. Because it's not. It's a very well-made movie, and it's a shame they went on to make some bad Scream movies. So, also, I haven't... do you like the Scream? I should have asked you this before I started talking shit on them.
I mean, for me, the first three are the best. Again, it's a franchise, one of my favourite franchises, but...
Yeah.
And I will watch them.
Well, what about the movies that they made, though? The movies that Radio Silence did. Do you like them, or do you think they're shit?
There's the moments, like you said, the guy getting, he should have died. I don't like the core four. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older now and they're young. I just don't like it.
Yeah, sometimes I get worried that plays a part in it now, where I'm so fucking old. I'm like, these fucking kids. But then at the same time, like, I think you can be justified in some moments. Like I said, like, one of them gets stabbed so many times and then absolutely fucking fine to the fact that he's going to turn up in the next one that comes out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think both movies, like, they had too many moments. And also, like, the last one they did, I literally, from the first time you saw him, I knew who the person was going to be Ghostface. So I was like, it's already ruined, because I'm like, it was so obvious, and the things they were saying, I'm like, okay, that's it. But yeah, so I didn't like them, but there's still promise, because they made this movie, they made Ready or Not. and they made Abigail, which I hear really good things. I'm really gutted I didn't get to see that last year, but fingers crossed I'll get to see it soon. Did you see Abigail?
Yeah, that was I did like a top 10 for 2024, and that was my number 2.
Oh, really? So it's that good?
I like it. Yeah, it's a shame it's kind of spoiled in the trailer with knowing, I'm not going to say it just in case you don't know, but with what exactly it's about. But no, it was still really good. Again, like this, it was just a fun time.
Yeah, and I think that's what they need to stick to. I think they need to like create their own things. I think it's good that they're outside of that Scream franchise, because obviously the problem with it, if you go into a franchise, you've got to like make your own thing, but also make somebody else's at the same time. So it's not easy.
No.
I just think that they unfortunately made the wrong choices. But whether that's because they were, you know, in somebody else's franchise, it's not easy. But I think like if they're doing their own stuff, like Abigail, as you said, I've heard it's brilliant, and you say it's brilliant. We know that this is brilliant. They're quite clearly very good filmmakers, quite quick, you know, clearly very good writers. And once again, I find it really, really interesting that they are a group that basically have come together to make movies. And I find that so interesting because normally it's just the one person that's a filmmaker, you know, like Spielberg, who has everybody else helping him make the movie. And this, it's just, I don't, in my head, I'm like, surely that can't work. Like, surely there must be like creative conflicts, like left, right, and center. But they seem to make it work because they've done this one, you know. So I look forward to see what happens next. Obviously, as I said, we know that Ready or Not 2 is happening. And like you said, as worried as I am about it, I'm still going to bloody watch it.
Yeah. We're going to watch it. Hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. There we go. So now I will do the your first time segment of the show. This is where you amazing people out there, you top notch creeps, you send me over your first horror movie memory that you can remember, and I add it into the episode. This one is quite a short one. But it's from Count Chocula. They sent this over to me on Instagram, so you can always go and find them over there. But they put, it was 1989, seeing a commercial for the Elm Street spin-off series Freddy's Nightmares on TV at 4 years old. I should have been terrified, but I was deeply fascinated. I've been a horror fan ever since. So there we go. I told you it was a short one. But yeah, it's interesting because when I read these, I'm like, oh, okay. But then you're like, oh, 4 years old. Like, imagine seeing Freddy Krueger at 4 years old.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you're like, are you going to be terrified? Are you just going to be like, oh, look at his little, like, crispy face. That's quite fun. And it's interesting to, once again, like, horror is so subjective, not just in the movies, but it's so subjective in regards to how we all personally feel towards everything differently. And that's what I love about it. Like, there are going to be movies that I like that you probably hate, and vice versa. And there are things so like you know, that revolve around the horror genre that are so interesting. And I find that really funny that at 4 years old, rather than being terrified, they were fascinated by burnt face man Freddy.
Yeah.
And that's always fun. And I always remember as well, there was when I was younger, there was a advert for It, like the original It with Tim Curry and so on. And there was an advert, and I don't know if anybody else remembers this as well. So let me know in the comments or whatever, or message me once again. I've said that a lot of this. I don't think I've ever fucking said that before, but here we go. You can fucking start doing it.
Get in touch.
But yeah, absolutely. Start doing it, everyone. But basically, there was an advert that they did, which was where it was like a street, and all there were like lights, you know, like street lights and so on like that. And then in the background, you sort of saw like this figure that was like running towards it and sort of like, you know, doing things. And I can't remember if he was spinning around or doing cartwheels and shit like that, you know, Pennywise shit.
Yeah.
And then he just sort of disappears. And the next thing you know, he's jumped up on the street light that's right in front of the camera, and then starts doing the Pennywise stuff. And I remember being a kid, and first thing I was just like, oh, that's fucking terrifying. But then I was just like, how fucking cool was that? Like, it was so well made. And then once again, as you get older, you start thinking about, well, that's horror. Like, that's how cool horror has always been, how it's always trying to, or always was, and still tries to continue to think outside the box of how to make you feel something when you're watching it. And as a kid, like we've mentioned with Count Chocula, with his Freddy's Nightmares memory, and how mine with Pennywise going down a street or whatever, it's always so interesting to me where journeys start and where horror sort of takes us on our journeys and so on, because it's always different and it's always so interesting to me. But I always ask my guests as well, if you can remember, Becky, do you remember your first time horror movie memory?
Well, I'm always very impressed when I hear you do this section and people remember like when they're 2, 3, 4 years old. I'm like, how my memory is the worst. I can barely remember last week, but one of my like earlier memories, I think I must have been about 9 or 10, was I went into the living room and sat down to watch a movie that my stepbrother was watching at the time, and it happened to be Evil Dead, the original. And yeah, I had nightmares for years. The deadite, in the floor, under in the cellar, I suppose you'd call it, coming out, and the creepy laugh, and it just terrified me. But I loved that feeling. I never watched it again until last year. A couple of years ago when I started my page, I rewatched it. I was brave.
That you got over the trauma,
But yeah, that one always stands out. Just how terrified I was when I saw that very scary film at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, and this is why I still have this segment in here, because it was one of the things, obviously, I brought over from when I've always done this segment since the first episode I've ever done, because it's something that's so interesting to me to see where people started their journeys. And one thing that, the more and more when I read these things, and I really enjoy getting them in and reading them, I don't just put them on a spreadsheet. I literally read them. I really enjoy them. I get so grateful that I get sent them, and then I add them in the episode because I think other people will enjoy hearing them. But one thing that I absolutely like, it makes me admire the genre so much, is how it really locks you in for one or two ways. You either you watch a horror movie, or you see glimpses of a horror movie as a kid, and then you go, fuck that, I'm never watching a horror movie ever again. Or, like yourself, you watched Evil Dead, it absolutely terrified you, but you wanted that again. And then that started your journey through horror at a young age, where you were like, and then you grow to love it. And that's what's so interesting to me. And, that how this genre works on a psychological level as well, that we can watch something that absolutely terrifies us, but yet we still want to keep watching it, and then we love it. Or we can watch something that's supposed to be terrifying to us, but yet you can't help but you're not terrified of it, but you're still in awe of it. You'll still love it so much that you're like, I can't wait to see the next one. And then before you know it, you're like 40 years old, like me, an old man, and you're doing a podcast all about it, because you're still like, I love this genre so much that I want to talk about it. And like you do with your podcast and so on like that. So I have that segment in it because I love reading it. I love sharing it on with you, but also it's so interesting to me of the impact that the genre has on people individually, so differently, and everybody's journey is different. But horror, whether it's your first time or not, or whatever, you never forget your first time, whether it is something that you never watched again and you were fucking shit your pants and you didn't do it, or like yourself, you just continue on your journey. And it's so interesting to me, and that is the power of what the horror genre is, and it's so interesting. So there we go. So now that's everything about Ready or Not. That's a first time horror movie memory. So if you would like to have your first horror movie memory read out on the show, you can just comment. If you're watching this, you can put it as a comment on YouTube. I don't know if you can direct message on YouTube. I'm not that fucking clever. But if you can't, leave it as a comment, your first horror movie memory, or you can go into any of our social media platforms. We're on fucking all of them because I post on them all the time. You can go to, as long as you send me a DM, and you can DM me your first horror movie memory, and I'll add it in. As I always say, think of it, it's like free promo for your page. If you've got a page or a YouTube channel, you ain't paying for it, and I basically put it out there. But I like reading them, and I like sharing them on. But now, Becky, it's now your time. Like I said at the start, to promote it's the worst part for everyone, because everybody hates it, especially if you're me. But basically, now's your time to tell everybody what you've got going on and where they can find everything that you do.
Okay, so pretty much only on Instagram for myself. You can find me at this.girl.loves.horror. And I mainly do horror reviews, but a bit of other horror content as well. So you can come and find me on there. But I'm also one half of the Girl and the Gay podcast. So me and Jay, we've just gone to weekly this year, so we're covering TV as well as films, but we do cover all genre of films. So yeah, again, we're on Instagram. You can come and find us on there, give us a follow, or go listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts after you've listened to Let's Talk Horror.
Yeah, well, nobody listens to mine. They might as well listen to yours. But anyway, yeah, that's it. I mean, look, go and support everything that Becky, obviously, and Jay does. Obviously, go. You can said you can follow on Instagram at this.girl.loves.horror. Go and find her on there. Make sure you do, because as I said, she's uploading, horror related content all the time. If you love horror, you've got to go and support somebody else's journey as well as mine, hopefully. And make sure you go and check out the Girl and the Gay podcast as well. If you just love people that love talking about movies, then you'll love that podcast as well. Why wouldn't you want to go and enjoy other people talking about it as well? And like you said, you can go on any podcast platform, go and check it out, and just bloody enjoy it. To close out the show for Let's Talk Horror, obviously so 2025 is a big year in regards to really implementing everything that I changed in 2024. All of that is really like where I'm like 25 is all about making sure I'm not fucking those things up, which is very easy for me to do because I mess everything up. But fingers crossed, I continue to do those things and improve on those things that I put in there for 2025. But there are some other things that I'm trying to put in that hopefully won't stress me out too much. So the way that everything works is that there are every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. I do the horrible morning. It's called Horrible Morning. It's very original, I know, but it's all I could fucking think of. But I do that show where I go through the week's best horror news for that week. So you can join me live on our YouTube channel every Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. if you want to know about the week's horror news. The reason I do that is because it means that you guys out there who want to know the news don't have to burden yourself with trying to find it. You can I won't talk about the shit. I just give you the decent news, and then you can come and join me live. And also, the good thing about that is where it's live, we can have like a conversation in the comments live as well. So the more people we get on that, the more fun it is, because it just comes, a half an hour chat about horror and talk about the news. And then as well as that, the new thing that I'm doing this year is that the last Thursday of every month, I will now be doing on our YouTube channel live watch-alongs, which is where I will sit down and watch a movie. And I thought, well, if I'm doing that, well, why don't you lot join me live as well? Do I know that it's going to work? Probably fucking not. I'm probably going to get taken down for copyright immediately, but it's trial and error. So I'm going to try and figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, I won't do it ever again. But for now, for the last Thursday of every month, unless I fuck it up and can't do it, I will be doing live watch-alongs. So anybody that's wants to join me for that, you're more than welcome to, and we can watch a movie together. Not in my house. I'm not having you fucking creeps in my house. I mean, like, you can watch it at your house. You press play when I press play, and we'll watch the movie together in a way, just in our separate homes. Don't be all fucking weirdo and come to my house. But yeah, and then we can watch, and I just think that'd be a bit of fun, because if the movie's shit, we can talk about how shit it is and have a laugh. If it's a classic, we can talk about why we love it as a classic. And I think it's something that I've always wanted to do, and I think it will be really fun. Will it work? As I said, I don't know, but we'll find out when we get there. And then, of course, I always have to thank the people going above and beyond who are on my Patreon, my official Creepazoids. We got the Flicks and Friends podcast. We've got Jamie Burns. We've got Rob Miller and Leighton Collins. You are my official Creepazoids over on Patreon. If you want to know a little bit more about that, just head over to patreon.com and look for Let's Talk Horror channel. You'll find out all the exclusive sort of content you get over there, such as the Creep's Choice episodes, which is where my Patreons, they choose a movie for me to watch and I watch it. And without spoiling it, they haven't given me a fucking one that I absolutely love yet. So I've been very, very honest in the episodes. They still enjoy them, they're telling me, but I am very worried that I'm upsetting them at the same time by saying how shit the movies they keep saying are. But luckily, we've spoken about a fantastic movie today. One that I, like what we've already said, I look forward to going back to watching again and revisiting. It's a movie that over time I know that I will continue to enjoy. I won't get bored of it ever. And I do hope that it sort of propels even further into not just the horror community, but outside of it. I really hope more people come to acknowledge this movie, well, watch this movie and then get to acknowledge how good of a movie it is. I don't want this movie to get lost. Yeah. That's what I don't want. You know, as I said, there's so many movies in this genre. I don't want this to be another one that gets lost because it doesn't deserve to. It needs to be held at like a very high regard, this movie. And I really hope so. Hopefully you feel the same way, or I'm just talking shit.
No, I do indeed. I absolutely agree. I think it is on its way to becoming like a classic, but just needs more people to keep seeing it.
Yeah, I suppose we'll wait until, another 4 years, and if people are still talking about it in 4 years when it's like 10, then we'll be like, oh, we were right, thank God. You know, it was. If nobody's talking about it, then I don't know, maybe we'll have to do another episode about it to get people to do it. But there we go. So anyway, so thank you so much, Becky, for coming on to the Let's Talk Horror podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you all about Ready or Not.
Thank you for having me, I say, and I very much enjoyed it as well, having a chat with you.
Good stuff, yes. Well, there we go. Until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.